So like I said, I am on today's section, as in September 10th section, according to your reading calendar. In my book, it's page 149, and the section begins with Mom and Dad told us. Mom and Dad told us how they'd made it to Phoenix only to find that Mom's laundry on the clothesline ploy hadn't kept out intruders. Our house on North 3rd Street had been looted. Pretty much everything was gone, including, of course, our bikes. Mom and Dad had rented a trailer to carry back what little was left. Mom said those foolish thieves had overlooked some good stuff, such as a pair of Grandma Smith's riding breeches from the 30s that were of the highest quality. But the Oldsmobile's engine had seized up in Nashville, and they'd had to abandon it along with the trailer of Grandma Smith's riding breeches and take the bus the rest of the way to Welch. I thought that once Mom and Dad returned, they'd be able to make peace with Irma, but she said she could never forget us kids and didn't want us in her house any longer, even if we stayed in the basement and kept as quiet as church mice. We were banished. That was the word Dad used. You did wrong, he said. Now we've all been banished. This isn't exactly the Garden of Eden, Lori said. I was more upset about the bike than I was about Irma banishing us. Why don't we just move back to Phoenix? I asked Mom. We've already been there, she said, and there are all sorts of opportunities here that we don't even know about. She and Dad set out to find us a new place to live. The cheapest rental in Welch was an apartment over a diner on McDowell Street that cost $75 a month, which was out of our price range. Also, Mom and Dad wanted outdoor space we could call our own, so they decided to buy. Since we had no money for a down payment and no steady income, our options were pretty limited. But within a couple of days, Mom and Dad told us they found a house they could afford. It's not exactly palatial, so there's going to be a lot of togetherness, Mom said. And it's on the rustic side. How rustic? Lori asked. Mom paused. I could see her debating how to phrase her answer. It doesn't have indoor plumbing, she said. Dad was still looking for a car to replace the Olds. Our budget was in the high 2 figures. So that weekend we hiked all over for our first look at our new place. We walked down the valley through the center of town and around a mountainside, past the small, tidy brick houses put up after the mines were unionized. We crossed a creek that fed into the Tug River and started up a barely paved 1-lane road called Little Hobart Street. It climbed through several switchbacks and for a stretch rose at an angle so steep you had to walk on your toes. If you tried walking flat-footed, you stretched your calves till they hurt. The houses up here were shabbier than the brick houses and lower down in the valley. They were made of wood with lopsided porches, sagging roofs, rusted out gutters, and balding tar paper or asphalt shingles, slowly but surely parting from the underwall. In almost every yard, a mutt or two was chained to a tree or to a clothesline post, and they barked furiously as we went by. Like most houses in Welch, these were heated by coal. The more prosperous families had coal sheds, the poorer ones left the coal in a pile out front. The porches were every bit as furnished as the inside of most houses, with rust-stained refrigerators, folding card tables, hook rugs, couches, or even car seats for serious porch sitting, and maybe a battered armoire with a hole cut in the side so the cat could have a cozy place to sleep. We followed the road almost to the end, where Dad pointed up at our new house. Well, kids, welcome to 93 Little Hobart Street, Mom said. Welcome to home sweet home. We all stared. The house was a dinky thing, perched high up off the road on a hillside so steep that only the back of the house rested on the ground. The front, including the drooping porch, jutted precariously into the air, supported by tall, spindly, cinder block pillars. It had been painted white a long time ago, but the paint, where it hadn't peeled off altogether, had turned a dismal gray. It's good we raised you young'uns to be tough, Dad said, because this is not a house for the faint of heart. Dad led us up the lower steps, which were made of rocks slapped together with cement. Because of the settling and erosion and downright slipshod construction, they tilted dangerously toward the street. Where the stone steps ended, a rickety set of stairs made from 2x4s, more like a ladder than a staircase, took you up to the front porch. Inside were 3 rooms, each about 10 feet by 10 feet, facing onto the front porch. The house had no bathroom, but underneath it, behind one of the cinder block pillars, was a closet-sized room with a toilet on a cement floor. The toilet wasn't hooked up to any sewer or septic system. It just sat atop a hole, about 6 feet deep. There was no running water indoors. A water spigot rose a few inches above the ground near the toilet so you could get a bucket and tote water upstairs. While the house was wired for electricity, Dad confessed that we could not, at the moment, afford to have it turned on. On the upside, Dad said, the house had cost only $1,000 and the owner had waived the down payment. We were supposed to pay him $50 a month. If we could make the payments on time, we'd own the place outright in under 2 years. Hard to believe that one day this will all be ours, said Lori. She was developing what Mom called a bit of a sarcastic streak. Count your blessings, Mom said. There are people in Ethiopia who would kill for a place like this. She pointed out that the house did have some attractive features. For example, in the living room was a cast iron pot-bellied coal stove for heating and cooking. It was big and handsome with heavy bear claw feet, and she was certain it was valuable. If you took it to a place where people appreciated antiques. But since the house had no chimney, the stovepipe vented out the back window. Someone had replaced the glass in the upper part of the window with plywood and wrapped tinfoil around the opening to keep the coal smoke from leaking into the room. The tinfoil had not yet done its job too well, and the ceiling was black with soot. Someone, probably the same someone, had also made the mistake of trying to clean the ceiling in a few spots and had ended up only smudging and smearing the soot, creating whitish patches that made you realize how black the rest of the ceiling was. Whoops, just lost my place. The house itself isn't much, Dad apologized, but we won't be living in it long. The important thing, the reason he and Mom had decided to acquire this particular piece of property, was that it came with plenty of land to build our new house. He planned to get to work on it right away. He intended to follow the blueprints for the glass castle, but he had to do some serious reconfiguring and increase the size of the solar cells to take into account that since we were on the north side of the mountain enclosed by the hills on both sides, we'd hardly ever get any sun. We moved in that afternoon. Not that there was much to move. Dad borrowed a pickup from the appliance store where Uncle Stanley worked and brought back a sofa bed that a friend of Grandpa's was throwing out. Dad also scavenged a couple of tables and chairs Dad also scavenged a couple of tables and chairs, and he built some makeshift closets, which were actually kind of nifty by hanging lengths of rope from the ceiling with wires. Mom and Dad took over the room with the stove, and it became a combined living room, master bedroom, art studio, and writer study. We put the sofa bed there, though once we opened it, it never went back to being a sofa. Dad built shelves along the upper walls to store Mom's art supplies. She set up her easel under the stovepipe right next to the back window because she said it got natural sunlight, which it did, relatively speaking. She put her typewriters under another window with shelves for her manuscripts and works in progress, and she immediately started thumbtacking index cards with story ideas to the walls. We kids all slept in the middle room. At first, we shared one big bed that had been left by the previous owner, but Dad decided that we were getting a tad old for that. We were also too big to sleep in cardboard boxes, and there wasn't enough room on the floor for them. Anyway, so we helped Dad build 2 sets of bunk beds. We made the frames from 2x4s, then we drilled holes in the sides and threaded ropes through them. For mattresses, we laid cardboard over the ropes. When we finished, our bunk beds looked sort of plain, so we spray painted the sides with ornate red and black curlicues. Dad came home with a discarded 4-drawer dresser, 1 drawer for each of us. He also built us a wooden box with sliding doors for personal stuff. We nailed them on the walls above our beds, and that's where I kept my geode. The third room at 93 Little Hobart Street, the kitchen, was in a category all its own. It had an electric stove, but the wiring was not exactly up to code with fully connected exposed lines and buzzing switches. Helen Keller must have wired this damn house, Dad declared. He decided it was too convoluted to even bother fixing. We called the kitchen the loose juice room because on rare occasions that we had paid the electricity bill and had power, we'd get a wicked electric shock if we touched any damp or metallic surface in the room. The first time I got zapped, it knocked my breath out and left me twitching on the floor. We quickly learned that whenever we ventured into the kitchen, we needed to wrap our hands in the driest socks or rags we could find. If we got a shock, we'd announce to everyone else, sort of like giving a weather report. "Big jolt from touching the stove today," we'd say. "Wear extra rags." One corner of the kitchen ceiling leaked like a sieve. Every time it rained, the plasterboard ceiling would get all swollen and heavy with water streaming steadily from the center of the bulge. During one particularly fierce rainstorm that spring, the ceiling grew so fat it burst, and water and plasterboard came crashing down onto the floor. Dad never repaired it. We kids tried patching the roof with our own tar paper, tinfoil, wood, and Elmer's glue, but no matter what we did, the water found its way through. And eventually, we gave up. So every time it rained outside, it rained in the kitchen too. At first, Mom tried to make the living at 93 Little Hobart Street seem like an adventure. The woman who had lived there before left behind an old-fashioned sewing machine that you could operate with a foot treadle. Mom said it would come in handy because we could make our own clothes even when the electricity was turned off. She also claimed you didn't need patterns to sew, you could get creative and wing it. Shortly after we moved in, Mom, Lori, and I measured one another and tried to make our own dresses. It took forever, and they came out baggy and lopsided with sleeves that were different lengths and armholes in the middle of our backs. I couldn't get mine over my head until Mom snipped out a few stitches. "It's stunning," she said. But I told her I looked like I was wearing a big pillowcase with elephant trunks sticking out of the sides. Lori refused to wear hers outdoors or even indoors, and Mom had to agree that sewing wasn't the best use of our creative energy or our money. The cheapest cloth we could find cost 79 cents a yard, and you needed more than 2 yards for a dress. It made more sense to buy thrift store clothes, and they had armholes in the right places. Mom also tried to make the house cheerful. She decorated the living room walls with her oil paintings, and soon every square inch was covered, except for the space above her typewriter reserved for her index cards. We had vivid desert sunsets, stampeding horses, sleeping cats, snow-covered mountains, bowls of fruit, blooming flowers, and portraits of us kids. Since Mom had more paintings than we had wall space, Dad nailed long shelf brackets to the wall, and she hung one picture in front of another until they were all 3 or 4 deep. Then she'd rotate the paintings. "Just a little redecorating to perk the place up," she'd say, but I believe she thought of her paintings as children and wanted them to feel that they were being treated equally. Mom also built rows of shelves in the windows and arranged brightly colored bottles to catch the light. "Now it looks like we have stained glass," she announced. And it did, sort of, but the house was still cold and dank. Every night for the first few weeks, lying on the cardboard mattress and listening to the sound of the rainwater dripping in the kitchen, I dreamed of the desert and the sun and the big house in Phoenix with the palm tree in the front and the orange trees and oleanders in the back. We had owned that house, outright, still owned it, I kept thinking. It was ours, the one true home we'd ever had. "Are we going home?" I asked Dad one day. "Home?" "Phoenix. This is home now." Okay, so I'm going to stop reading there for today. Let me stop recording. Stop recording.